All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this webinar as part of the Envision Hanover Comprehensive Plan update process here in Hanover County. We're to go ahead and get started. This is one of several opportunities for public engagement that we have planned over the next couple of weeks. Our first round of public engagement, our first meeting associated with this round of public engagement began on Monday, and then we have meetings through May 1st. So if you visit envisionhanover.com and get involved, if you've other people you know that want to be involved in the planning process, particularly these three topic areas, rural housing and active living, feel free to share that information about upcoming meetings with them. So for the webinar today, this is the same presentation that we've been giving at the in-person meetings that are scheduled throughout the county. We'll give a presentation that's about 25 to 30 minutes, an overview of what the comprehensive plan is, what we heard and what we presented in round one of the focus areas, and then more in-depth information about the current focus areas. Again, those are rural, active living, and housing. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end. And then at the in-person meetings, we have an open house style format following the Q&A where people can have more one-on-one conversations. All of the draft documents that we'll be talking about today are on the Envision Hanover website. If you go to envisionhanover.com and then the project resources, there's the draft documents as currently prepared and proposed, as well as links to the current comprehensive plan. So what is the comprehensive plan? The comprehensive plan is a long-range planning document that establishes a vision for growth and development in the county over the next 20 years. It serves as a guide to assist decision makers such as the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors as they review development proposals and as they prepare the capital improvement program and pursue other types of public investment. The plan is general in nature, but it's comprehensive because it addresses a variety of different topics such as land use, transportation, environment, those sorts of things. Per state code, every locality in Virginia must have a comprehensive plan, and it must be reviewed every 5 years. Hanover County's first comprehensive plan was in 1972, and the county's been pretty diligent about reviewing it and updating it on a regular basis. The current comprehensive plan was adopted in February 2018, so we're right on that 5-year mark in terms of updating that document. So what have we heard so far? We launched the planning effort in fall of 2021. We began outreach in early 2022, and part of that first year of outreach was really focusing on higher level feedback, community strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and that kind of thing. And based on that feedback, we identified 10 major themes out of the 4,000 comments we received. One of the top themes we heard during that first phase of public engagement, and we continue to hear, is that it's really important for people to preserve the rural character found in much of the county. And related to that, there's a lot of interest in managing growth. Related to one of the topic areas we're talk about today is providing quality and diverse housing options. In terms of community infrastructure and services, we heard a lot about maintaining and enhancing the transportation network. And based on the comments we received, that doesn't only mean improving the safety and capacity of roadways, but also providing more opportunities for pedestrians and cyclists, maintaining good schools, providing more parks, particularly within the suburban service area, and expanding broadband access. In regards to community character, we heard a lot about incorporating the rural character found in most of the county, not only within those rural areas, but into the suburban service area where we have higher intensity development. Providing transitions between different types of uses. So how do you address that interface between residential and adjoining commercial or industrial uses, for example? And how do you address that transition from the higher intensity development within the suburban service area to the more rural development found or rural character found in much of the county? Protecting and enhancing our rural villages and crossroads, creating well-planned residential neighborhoods, and accommodating business development and economic development near interstates and major corridors. So as we receive all this different feedback, we're getting a lot of great ideas and a lot of great feedback from these 4,000 different comments. One challenge that staff has and the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors will have is balancing all this different feedback and addressing all these different ideas and really create a plan that the community can support and endorse and use moving forward. As I mentioned, the comprehensive plan is considered comprehensive because it addresses a variety of different topics, including land use, economic vitality, history and culture, active living, housing, and a variety of different things. A couple of these different topic areas have been addressed in the current plan, but in this proposed plan, they'll be their own chapter, so there'll be greater focus. For example, rural, over 78% of the county is designated to remain rural. There'll be a chapter dedicated to those different resources, which we'll talk more about today. Housing, there's not a dedicated chapter for housing in the current comprehensive plan, so the new plan will have more information and focus on housing. And then we have an environment chapter right now, but we're also going to add a component called resiliency. So to address these different topic areas and collaborate with the public on these different issues, we're dividing the chapters into different focus areas or rounds of engagement. Our first round of engagement, which was earlier this year, focused on land use, economic vitality, and history and culture. And now we're moving into active living, housing, and rural. The final round of topic areas will really be more focused on infrastructure as well as resiliency. So we're getting feedback on these different areas. And as we move from one round to the other, we're to circle back with the public to get more input from them and to share what we changed based on their ideas. So I'll just give a brief overview of what we presented and what we heard during the round one focus areas before we get into the current focus areas. And I don't know if you all participated in this focus area, but we had about 220 people participate in public meetings and other events in early 2023. And I'll share what we heard from them. So in terms of the concepts presented at those meetings, related to land use, the direction was to maintain the boundaries of the suburban service area as is. That suburban service area is where the county has or plans to provide public utilities to accommodate higher intensity development. Based on direction from the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, the boundaries of that suburban service area will remain generally as is. That development area makes up about 22% of the county. In regards to that transition concept I mentioned earlier, the draft plan has a proposed suburban transitional residential designation along the edges of the suburban service area. And again, that's supposed to provide a kind of a step down in residential densities between the suburban areas and the rural areas. The current plan focuses a lot on uses and where different types of uses may be appropriate, but doesn't have much detailed guidance on the design of development, whether that's the functionality, the form, architecture, landscaping, those sorts of things. So the draft documents have a little bit more guidance on how development should look and function. There's no change in the distribution of residential growth or the recommended distribution of residential growth throughout the county. 70% of residential growth is intended to be directed to that suburban service area, with the remaining 30% in the rural. And over the past 10 years, that growth management target has generally been adhered to in reality. And then based on development trends, a 1% growth rate is assumed. So at these meetings, we presented draft general land use plans and identified all the different changes with the rationale for the changes to the map in different spreadsheets. Those were the concepts we presented. And in terms of public feedback, there was a lot of support for maintaining the suburban service area as is. There's not much public interest in expanding that at all. There's support for some of these different design-based concepts, including the residential transitions to the rural areas. And then we got some more comments on residential densities within the suburban service area. Related to some of the things we'll be talking about today in the land use section, we heard from the public there's interest in improving walkability within already established areas, including Mechanicsville Village and the US Route 1 corridor, particularly south of the town of Ashland. There's also interest we heard throughout the planning process in having more amenitized parks, particularly in the suburban service area. We have some larger scale parks and those with athletic fields just outside the suburban service area, but people expressed interest in being able to have some smaller, more passive parks within walking distance of their homes. And then one change that you'll see in the maps, if you look online, there was interest in mapping conserved areas, and those are shown now on the revised version of the general land use plan. On the actual draft general land use plan itself, we received 86 comments, and about 2/3 or more than 2/3 were supportive of the proposed changes. Of those comments that we received that expressed concerns, most of the time, the citizen or stakeholder that commented wanted lower intensity development than what was recommended in the draft documents. So we have revised the general land use plan again. I have a new iteration that's posted online. That first iteration is dated January 2023. We have a April 2023 version on envisionhanover.com. And at the public meetings, we have those available to review. History and culture and economic development were the other two chapters that we shared ideas on. And the main changes in the history and culture section involve providing some more guidance regarding any new development that happens either within our National Register of Historic Districts or new development that includes features that are historic in nature. So if a development occurs on a site that has historic cemeteries or battlefield features, there's more guidance on how those types of features can be incorporated into new development if possible. And economic vitality, that's our economic development section. Some of the main new concepts here are categorizing our economic development zones into different types based on their current state and their needs. So since 2000, the county has developed or has identified economic development zones, which are areas targeted for economic development, and they're largely along the 295 and I-95 corridors. In the current comprehensive plan, there's not a lot of guidance on what that EDZ policy or EDZ designation really means. And the EDZs are all treated the same no matter where they are and what their state of development is. In the draft documents, the EDZs are divided into three types: emerging employment zones, which are more greenfield sites where there's more developable acreage available to accommodate larger scale economic development projects that are new. There's established employment hubs, and those are areas like the air park or other types of areas where there's already established businesses that are already largely developed. How can we continue to support businesses there through business retention efforts and improving infrastructure to meet their needs today? And then there's the renewal areas, and these are areas such as Old Mechanicsville Village, where citizens expressed interest in supporting the existing businesses are there, but also improving the aesthetics and bringing that up more to modern standards and creating attractive gateways to the community. And in general, the citizens that we heard from the first round of public engagement were supportive of most of these concepts. They really wanted to promote even further heritage and cultural tourism as an economic development tool and as a way to highlight our historic resources. One concept that you'll see in the proposed active living chapter is we got comments that citizens really wanted to connect the different sites in the Cold Harbor Battlefield area. There's federally owned sites the National Park Service manages, as well as county sites that have historic resources and trails on those individual sites. How do you link those together, not only to serve area residents, but possibly create more tourism opportunities? In terms of economic development, there were some comments that we really need to make sure our housing options that are available here in the county meet the needs of our current businesses as well as any businesses we hope to attract. And there was some concern about one of the economic development zones that's located north of the town of Ashland along I-95. And continue with that theme of revitalization, people really think that Mechanicsville Village is a special place, but they really like to improve it and make it a more walkable destination. So a summary of all the topics that we heard or all the feedback we heard during the round one topic areas is available online. There's a memo that you can review what we heard. There's also a summary of all the comments we heard even prior to that in other rounds of public engagement, as well as the original 4,000 comments that we heard during 2022. So that's an overview of what we heard during round one, and now we'll move into the different concepts that we're going to present as part of the round two public engagement. So these three focus areas are rural character, housing, and active living. Again, that rural chapter is a new chapter for this comprehensive plan. Since the county is intended to remain largely rural, 78% of its land area is outside of the suburban service area. We thought it was pretty important to highlight our rural areas, and plus maintaining rural character is one of the top things we hear no matter where we go as part of the public engagement process. As part of the initial round of public engagement in 2022, we asked people to define what rural means to them. We use that word rural a lot in Hanover County. What does it mean in the context of our community? And as part of this planning effort, we're trying to create a characterization or definition of rural that we can use as we evaluate different policies and proposals. So these are some of the things that people said. Of course, agriculture and farming was the top most common answer: large lot residential development, open space, and that kind of thing. So we worked with the community participation team, which is the guiding committee for the comprehensive plan update, as well as the planning commission and the board of supervisors, to develop a definition of what rural means in the context of Hanover County. And this is the characterization that those different groups came up with. Again, they wanted to acknowledge that Hanover is largely rural, but we also have different rural communities throughout the county. You know, Beaver Dam and Montpelier have a different feel and character, even though they're rural, to Old Church and Cold Harbor. So we're just highlighting the different areas, but also characterizing some of those common values and experiences that you might see in those rural areas. The recommendations for this chapter, as presented in the draft document that we're getting feedback on right now, are divided into 4 different areas: land preservation, strategies for residential development outside the suburban service area. How can you integrate rural residential development into the rural context to the greatest extent that you can? How do you incorporate that rural character into the suburban service area? People within the suburban service area that we've heard from said, even though they live in the suburban area, they want to have some of that rural feel in their daily experiences and as new development occurs. And then supporting the local agricultural economy. I'll go into a little bit more detail what strategies are associated with each of these objectives. So in terms of land preservation, the county has had the suburban service area within its comprehensive plan since 1982. And this recommendation supports the concept of managing growth by continuing to direct most of our development to the suburban service area to help reduce sprawl in the rural areas. Many nonprofits and governmental agencies are already working with landowners to permanently protect land through conservation easements. So we're recommending that we continue to work with those organizations to support them as they work to protect our rural lands. And then there are several taxation programs in the county that are already in place to help landowners deal with the tax burdens. And that includes the agricultural and forestal district program and the land use taxation programs. So that recommendation is to continue those programs and promote them to make sure landowners are aware of those different tools that are available to them. Residential strategies in rural areas. So within the rural areas, the current comprehensive plan and the draft comprehensive plan allow residential development at densities of up to 1 unit per 6¼ acres. As that large lot residential development occurs in the rural areas, the draft plan has some recommendations on how it can be integrated into the character of those areas and also minimize disruption to any existing agricultural operations. And that plan, the draft plan recommends that different buffers be provided and different features be incorporated into the design of the development to minimize impacts on the viewshed and again minimize any potential negative impacts or interactions that new residential development has on existing agricultural operations. And then within the suburban service area itself, we had to think of different ways to have that rural feel integrated into areas where there's higher intensity development. And some of the recommendations related to that include wider buffers, really being thoughtful in the design of open space and keeping larger areas of open space that are visible from public roads and that kind of thing within the development and preserving existing trees. Fostering the local agricultural economy, there's a little bit more guidance on appropriate types of agribusiness and how those can be designed and situated to minimize any negative impacts on existing neighbors, connecting farms with local consumers, and then really evaluating the impact that agriculture has on the local economy. Right now, there's not an updated list of agricultural operations or what impact they have on the community. So how can we better understand the impact? And again, that helps us really improve and enhance the agricultural economy. And then housing. Again, this is a new chapter. The current comprehensive plan does not have a chapter dedicated directly to housing. And this is one of the more challenging and complex issues the county is currently facing. Most of the housing in Hanover County is single family detached units. 89% of the current housing stock is single family detached. The housing stock is aging. 70% of our housing was built before 2000, so it's over 20 years old. And as the housing ages, of course, there are some different maintenance needs and that kind of thing. More than 50% of our housing is in the southeastern portion of the suburban service area. So that's the suburban service area east of 95. That includes the Atlee, Mechanicsville area. So a lot of our housing is concentrated in that particular portion of the growth area. Like much of the region in the state, there's really limited inventory and house prices continue to rise. In January of this year, the median sales price was $440,000 and the average sales price was approaching $500,000. So affordability is a challenge here in Hanover County compared to especially some of the previous years. Also, based on data from the Partnership for Housing Affordability, there are some cost burden households, and what a cost burden household is a household that spends more than 30% of its income on either rent or mortgage, as well as utilities and other things associated with housing and maintaining that housing. Uh, about 40% of our renter households are cost burden. And one thing we're seeing in the trends is that a lot of the new rental units that are coming online are going for rents more than $2,000. So they aren't necessarily attainable for some of the workforce housing that we have. So it's, further exacerbating the problems. And although Hanover County does have a significant number of house burden households and affordability challenges, looking at the state numbers, it's pretty comparable to what's going on statewide. So it's not just a Hanover issue. So to better understand the housing issues and get some ideas, our community participation team heard from different experts in the region that work in housing. We heard from the Home Building Association of Richmond and the challenges that new home builders face regarding housing costs and those sorts of things. The Partnership for Housing Affordability, which is a regional organization that looks at housing affordability and housing trends. And then from the Hanover King William Habitat for Humanity, who works on affordable housing issues, of course, here in Hanover County. And some of the things they said is, of course, rising home prices and rents are creating a need for different housing options and workforce housing. Hanover County has one of the fastest growing senior populations in the region. So again, that aging population really creates a need for different housing options and create a need for assistance programs such as tax relief for the elderly and home repair programs. Some of our experts really felt that focusing on the home repair programs and supporting seniors was one of the key things that the county could do. And while these nonprofits are working in the county to address housing needs and affordable housing needs in particular, they can't do it alone. They need some sort of partnership. And then the speakers shared different ideas that they had. Based on what we heard from those different experts, we talked to the Board of Supervisors to try to understand what they felt like the role the county should take in housing, and there's different levels of involvement that different communities throughout the state are doing to address local housing needs. Based on the feedback we received, different housing strategies are recommended, and the full text and recommended strategies in the draft text are posted online, but there really is a lot of focus on supporting the senior population and their housing needs, as well as reinvesting in existing housing stock. So there's already some programs that really literally no one's taking advantage of. The residential rehabilitation tax exemption program, that program's not used. How can we promote that and use that as a tool to continue to reinvest in our existing neighborhoods and then continue property tax exemptions for seniors? There's not a lot of surplus county-owned land in the county, but as opportunities arise, how can that be leveraged to provide either affordable senior housing or workforce housing? Many in our community, based on what we've heard, aren't aware of all the affordability challenges. How can we promote that? And again, continuing to reinvest in those residential neighborhoods that are already established. So there's kind of the main overview of housing. Now we'll move into active living. Active living was a new chapter in the 2017 comprehensive plan, and it really focuses primarily on pedestrian and bicycle connectivity and mobility. The new concepts in this plan really address the 4 different areas. There's design guidance for sidewalks and bikeways within residential development in the suburban service area, design guidance for commercial development in the suburban service area, and how it can be more walkable and bikeable. How we address our regional trail networks, such as the Fall Line Trail, that should be coming online during the planning horizon. And then we identify pedestrian and bicycle capital investment focus areas, and that's where the county could really target its resources, have the biggest impact for pedestrian and bicycle mobility. So in terms of design guidance, the aim is to create a safe, comfortable, and convenient opportunity and network for walking and biking. There's specific guidance with pictures that shows how pedestrian and bicycle mobility can be improved within residential and non-residential development. And one thing I want to mention is, the comprehensive plan is comprehensive. It has all these different topic areas, but all the different topic areas and all the different chapters are really intertwined. So this is not the only chapter that provides guidance on pedestrian and bicycle mobility. There's also chapters related to, or guidance related to pedestrian and bicycle mobility within the land use chapter and the transportation chapter, which we'll be developing over the next few months. Photos, again, help provide some guidance on how these different features could be designed. So some of the things we're talking about in terms of safety, comfort, and convenience: safety, providing buffer strips between pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in the travel lanes, using traffic calming in residential neighborhoods where appropriate, and partnering with VDOT on that. And then convenience, you really want to create an interconnected network with direct connections between different uses, and that includes direct connections to regional trail networks and public facilities. Regarding the regional trail networks, there's an objective and recommendations about supporting development of a regional trail network. Again, that Fall Line Trail already has funding and designs underway, and that'll be begin construction probably within the next year or so. So we want to really capitalize on that and create connections and provide amenities for residents and visitors who are using that trail. In the 2017 plan, this concept of having a Chickahominy River Trail, which would extend west from 995 to Route 33, was introduced then, and it still is introduced in the current plan. This plan recommends we do a little bit more study to help further define where that trail could be and work with developers to get that constructed as development occurs in that portion of the suburban service area. And based on the feedback we received during round one, there is recommendations on furthering pedestrian and bicycle mobility to connect battlefield sites in the Cold Harbor area. The project team worked with the Board of Supervisors to help identify potential capital investment focus areas for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. These are some of the areas. Most are within the suburban service area, in areas where there's a concentration of residential and/or commercial development. But one of the focus areas, which is new, is the pedestrian and bicycle spine network. That's a new concept we're getting feedback on. That spine network is really intended to link residential communities to daily necessities such as schools, libraries, and grocery stores, and is a starting point for building out the county's pedestrian bicycle network. That network is really focused on the suburban service area, particularly the portions of the suburban service area east of Elmont towards Mechanicsville and Cold Harbor. And they're probably hard to see on this particular PowerPoint, but the full maps are available on the Envision Hanover website. If you go to envisionhanover.com project resources, it shows the existing sidewalks that we have in the county, the identified or potential spine network, as well as areas of need and spot improvements. Now, the spot improvements, those are areas we're really looking for feedback on. Those are areas where there's just a short connection needed or a limited amount of investment needed to really create big impacts and big connections on the county's pedestrian and bicycle network. So those maps are available again online on Vision Hanover. And if you or anyone else is interested in coming to public meetings, we have print full size available copies for people to look at. So that's an overview of the different concepts that are proposed as part of the previous three focus areas. And again, we're getting feedback through different efforts and public meetings that last through May 1st. And here's how the process will go moving forward. So we had our first meeting, as I mentioned, Monday night. That was in person. We'll have our next meeting on Monday, and again, lasting through May 1st. And then those are the main in-person opportunities to provide public engagement. And we'll also be posting this webinar online. It's being recorded. So if there's someone that can't attend a public meeting and you think this would be information that's valuable for them, in a few days, you'll be able to share that with them. So right now we're looking at feedback on these three topic areas, as well as the proposed revisions to the previous topic areas. We're hoping to get any feedback by May 15th so we can really start diving in and making any changes prior to the next round of focus areas. You can provide ideas by talking with Joanne Hunter and I on the project team, dropping off comments at one of the public meetings. You can also email comments to envisionhanover@hanovercounty.gov. There's a form online on the Envision Hanover website as well where you can both sign up for email updates on the planning process as well as provide feedbacks. All these documents, again, are on the Envision Hanover website under project resources. And this is what that website is. So again, envisionhanover.com, third tab, project resources. The different draft documents associated with the current planning effort are grouped into different categories. And this includes updates to the documents presented in the first round of public engagement based on the feedback we received, as well as the new chapters that are currently under their preliminary presentation to the public. So as I mentioned, round one public engagement on those three initial topic areas was earlier this year. We're in round two, hoping to wrap that up by May timeframe. And then we'll begin the final round of focus area meetings, which really focus on public infrastructure. We're hoping to have a public hearing with the Planning Commission in August, so we'll have a complete draft plan by then. And then the Board of Supervisors is tentatively scheduled to have its public hearing on the comp plan in September. So if we get all the feedback we receive, we could theoretically have a new plan adopted by fall of this year. So again, I encourage you to visit the Envision Hanover website, envisionhanover.com, for up-to-date information about the planning process. You can sign up for our email list there as well. And we further promote events on different social media pages associated with Envision Hanover. That includes Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So at this time, we can open it up for any questions that that you may have. You can enter your questions in the chat, or I think you should be able to unmute your microphones if you'd like to just say your question. Again, we'll be posting this webinar online and posting it on the website in the coming days.
Hey, Andrew, I have a question.
Sure.
If there's a desired change to a boundary, does that, and that change has already been incorporated in the draft plan, does a request need to be made, or is the boundary as shown what's going to be proposed?
So the draft general land use plan that is online is a draft plan. Ultimately, the final maps aren't final until they're adopted by the Board of Supervisors. If there's a change that you support, I think that's what you're indicating. If you support that change, you can submit a comment to us. You can submit to Envision Hanover at hanovercounty.gov saying you support that change, and that way we'll have it on the record. We've been going through all the comments, both internally as well as with the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors members. So all these comments are being vetted. So if it's a draft change that you support, I think it would be helpful for you to submit your comments and indicate your support. It could change during the planning process, but this is the second go around that we're showing these maps to members of the public. So they have been vetted to a certain extent, but if it's something you support, I think it would be, beneficial to share your support for that change.
Okay, great, thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Also, you can feel free to contact us. Our contact information is on the website, and we'd be happy to discuss more one-on-one. Again, I'm Andrew Pompey, the project manager, principal planner for this project, and we have Joanne Hunter here. She's the senior director of community development. She is also working on this project too. So feel free to reach out to us individually, or again, shoot an email to envisionhanover at hanovercounty.gov, or use that online form to share anything else that you might have.
One last question. If we do support a proposed change, should we include justification for our support for changing that?
I think any information you want to provide would be helpful. It's totally up to you what level of detail or comments that you want to provide. But again, we're going through all these comments, not only internally, but with different decision makers. So any information you think is important for us to know would be welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks again for joining us for the webinar. Again, if you have other people you work with or friends or neighbors that are interested in being part of the process, direct them to the website and to one of the upcoming events. We'll continue different having outreach throughout the summer and possibly into the fall with the Planning Commission tentatively scheduled to have its public hearing in August. So thanks again for participating, and we hope you can continue to be involved in the planning process.